Pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God. But, speaking now in prophecy, I say that in times to come, no one will pursue philosophy with single-mindedness and purity of heart. Those with a grudging and ungenerous temperament will try to prevent men from discovering the priceless gift of immortality. Philosophy will become confused, making it hard to comprehend, and it will be corrupted by spurious speculation, and it will be entangled with bewildering sciences like arithmetic, music, and geometry. The student of pure philosophy studies the sciences not as fanciful theories, but as devotion to Atum, because they reveal a universe perfectly ordered by the power of number, because measuring the depths of the sea and forces of fire and magnitudes of physical things leads to a reverent awe at the Creator's skill and wisdom, because the mysteries of music bear witness to the unsurpassed talent of the supreme artist, who has beautifully harmonized all things into a single whole, suffused with sweet melodies. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning of the prophecies of Hermes, and the first words of Hermes from the Hermetica, the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. A pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of what? Atum, or also put in the first words of Hermes in the Corpus Hermeticum, O my son, write this first book both for humanity's sake and for reverence and honor towards Atum, towards God. For there can be no spiritual pursuit, religion, more true or just than to know the things that are, and to acknowledge thanks for all things to that which hath made them, the Creator, which thing I shall not cease continually to do. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The 7 Hermetic Principles is where we find ourselves today, continuing our series in the Kybalion and continuing our discovery and research into Hermetic philosophy. The 7 Hermetic Principles, the principles of truth, are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The 7 Hermetic principles on which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. Number 1, the principle of mentalism. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. Number 3, the principle of vibration. And where we find ourselves today, ladies and gentlemen, number 4, the principle of polarity. And we will continue to go through polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and see if we can make it all the way to the end in the 7th principle of gender. Thank you for being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me and all the wonderful authors and poets and mystics and philosophers and sages of the ages. Ladies and gentlemen, we're reading from the Kybalion for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind so that through that increased awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. The 7 Hermetic Principles. Principle number 4. If you missed the first 3, that was last week's video on this series. So check out the playlist on this channel. Principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same opposites of identical. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles, or opposite aspects, positive, negative, of a magnetic field, and that opposites, quote unquote, are really only two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites, ladies and gentlemen, are really the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing, temperature. And that same thing which manifests heat and cold is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat. And the phenomena, I would say that which we call temperature. But if you think about how a refrigerator works, it makes it cold by sucking out the heat. So an absence of heat creates cold. But anyways, that's not the point. And the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the degree consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomenon. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, hard and soft, between black and white, sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, high and low, positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and varying degrees of love. And at a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. So there's this gray area. In between this area of poles, there's one phenomena that is both of them. And there's this gray area where it's like, when does one become the other? Because they're all a part of the same thing. Hot and cold being temperature, loud or quiet being different varying degrees of sound. All of this. All are simply degrees of the same thing. As you will see, if you will but think a moment, and more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermeticists, if it is possible to change the vibrations, see, this comes back to frequencies and vibrations, the most important, possibly underlying aspect of reality. Frequencies, vibrations. And more than this, and considered to be of more importance by the Hermeticists, It is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines or listen to this video have had personal experiences of the involuntary, rapid transition from love to hate. And the reverse, in your own case, of that and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use, most importantly here, by the use of will, your willpower, your intention, your focus, your attention. By means of the Hermetic formulas, you can accomplish this rapid transition from hate to love or love to hate, hopefully hate to love, by means of the use of will and Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing. And the Hermeticists understands that the art of transmuting evil into good by means of application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of this principle will enable one to change his or her own polarity, as well as that of others, if he or she will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a boom to the principle of polarity. Just a small overview. It said in the beginning of this chapter that these 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed through more lessons. But a short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point in our journey. And so that's why we're going through a short explanation and discovery of each of the 7 Hermetic principles. That was principle number 4, polarity, and now we find ourselves on number 5, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward or forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide. Between the 2 poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago, there is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. A rising and a sinking. So a lot of this has been about duality here today, and the oneness that is what the duality is based upon, or the source that the manifestations, the things that we see, are all connected, the source that the manifestations are based upon. This is a key understanding in Hermetics, that there is this source for all the individual things that would seem to be separate, but yet they are a part of this oneness, that is, a part of God. Atum, the things that are. There is always an action and a reaction. This, in the affairs of the universe, suns and worlds and men, animals and mind, energy and matter. So maybe those are all the affairs of the universe. If only it was that simple. We have universe, suns, worlds, men, animals. Then we have mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally, in the mental states of man, humanity, man and woman, ladies and gentlemen. And it is with this latter, the mental states, that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of appropriate formulas and methods. So, what I got when I read through these previously in the past, it was probably a year or two ago. I think I'm up to this chapter, the Divine Paradox, but we'll get to there in the future. But what this is making me think of is there is a way to use this knowledge, the ancient wisdom of the ages, the wisdom of the pharaohs, the previous golden age, whatever you want to call it, this ultimate knowledge of the functioning of reality and the nature of the things that are, and then an ability to use that knowledge in a certain way, as the Hermeticists find the most important being the mental aspect, the power of mind. Remember, all is mind. And there's a way to use this knowledge of these principles and aspects of reality in order to change your life, change your reality, your experience, and the experience of those around us, to have a higher quality of experience. So this ebbing and flowing of the tides, good things and bad things happening to us. This is normal. But with this knowledge, the Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding it universal application. They have discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle, so we can't cancel out the functionings of reality. It is how it is, but we can work within it. So they don't annul the principle. They cannot, rather, or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. So what, in common terms, what would that mean? Chase, tell us, please. Well, I'm no master. We're just learning on this journey together, ladies and gentlemen, so please don't ever think that. But together, what do we think this means, ladies and gentlemen? Well, law of neutralization. To learn how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. So this swing of the pendulum, the rise and the fall, the to and the fro, the high tide and the low tide, if we don't want that, I mean, it is very natural in life to have that, so it's not like we shouldn't want that. But if there are certain areas where we would like to, quote unquote, neutralize the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, then there is that opportunity for us in reality. A lot of people would say, no, that's impossible. Actually, a lot of people would say, what are we even talking about here? I've never heard this. Is all crazy. That's why we're here. Because when you first hear this, you're like, that sounds crazy. And then when you really consider it, you're like, well, I guess it isn't. That kind of makes sense. And then you're like, wow, is this even real? Then you're like, yeah, I guess it is. You just go through these steps until you're like, wait a minute. You could spend an entire lifetime trying to figure out the functioning and like We said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, a pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation, a constant meditation, a constant ponderation, a constant rumination, a thinking upon. So you can spend entire lifetimes to come to know the things that are, for there can be no spiritual pursuit more true or just than to come to know the things that are and to acknowledge thanks for all things. Well, when you get to this point, after you say, that can't be real, that's crazy, and then you say, wow, maybe, then you're like, wow, this is like real magic here. Mental alchemy, ladies and gentlemen. Mental transmutation. They apply the mental law of neutralization. And so then we discover, wow, we could spend many, many, many lifetimes trying to discover and apply the wisdom and the knowledge of the things that are. To increase the quality of our lives, we never go against the will of any other human beings. They have learned how to use it. Use is capitalized there. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. Key distinction there, because these natural things are just happening. The ebb and the flow and the polarities, and we're usually used by it. We're just a part of it going on. But there is a way that we can actually flow with it and begin to use it to our advantage. This is what I mean usually when we're talking about going with the flow and talking about the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching and other spiritual philosophies about just kind of letting go and seeing how reality is flowing and then working within that. It's like when you get in the water, you can't push on it and get a firm grasp of it. You have to see what it's doing and get used to it and then relax and go with it. And then you can swim and float. However, metaphors. I'll try not to ramble too much because I want to get through these. We have a couple more, ladies and gentlemen. A couple more. The mental law of neutralization. This is real magic, ladies and gentlemen. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery, self-actualization, some kind of personal psychological self-help work, do this very thing to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, because we've realized that there's this ego thing going on where it's a swing from peace. It's getting windy out there. But anyway, see, it's a swing from relaxation and peace to struggle and, forcing and pushing, and then back to allowing and really. And so those of us who have done some sort of work to any degree of self-mastery, we have discovered this within ourselves, that we tend to swing. And we would like to not swing. To the negative side, anyways, we'd like to spend most of our time as much as we can in the positive side. That's why I say, seek to achieve, maintain happiness through enlightenment. But happiness is the way. So if we can get ourselves to a point to where we're not swinging back out of, into the stress and the anxiety and the struggle and the pushing and we can keep ourselves on this side of the pendulum, the master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest. He or she. It sounds easy, believe me. I am no master, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we are here. With this constant contemplation on this pure philosophy. So we can hopefully get to attain the knowledge of Atum and the things that are. But All individuals do this to a certain degree who have done any work of self-mastery, more or less unconsciously, so we're not even thinking about it. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them, big emphasis on the word using, form an important, I would say an extremely important part for all of us to try to understand in our own lives, using our minds to create our reality. What you think about expands. Secret of the universe. What you think about expands. And so, imagine if everything you thought about was created instantaneously. Even your negative thoughts. Imagine how difficult it would be for even 10 minutes to have the will and the mental ability and power to only focus on that which you would like. Because the moment we start focusing on that which we would like, we begin to compare, and instantly the opposite pops up. How much work and practice would it take to where the master consciously and by the use of his will attains a degree of poise and mental firmness, ability, which would seem almost impossible to all of us to believe on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and the means of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. That was incredible. I'm tempted to leave it there and save the last two for next week, but it's only a page and a half, so let's run through it. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you're getting value. If you are, consider subscribing. Share this with somebody who is like-minded. It helps support the work that we do here. Thank you so much for being here. Honor and reverence to Atum, God, simply. If you have a different name for God, that's fine. Spirit, grand organized design, God. There is no name for that which is all names. When it is named, it is not the eternal. When it is eternal, it is all names. It is not named. Principle number 6 of the 7 Hermetic principles. The principle of cause and effect. That last little bit about it has no names and the names and it is all names. That's actually a Taoist teaching from Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, but it's mirrored in all kinds of spiritual philosophies. So the Hermetics describe similar things in our study of the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, every cause, the principle of cause and effect. Principle number 6 of the 7 Hermetic principles. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law, not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, and that nothing ever merely happens or is coincidence. So we can throw that out the window right away. There is no accidents, coincidences, mistakes. Everything that happens in reality is according to the function of the law of reality or the universe. That doesn't mean that from our perspective, we wouldn't say all that shouldn't, that isn't the way that it should be, and all that was a mistake. Whoops. Those are human concepts. As we discovered in the Corpus Hermeticum and the Hermetica, and so far in this discovery of the Kybalion and Hermetic philosophy, is that we need to step back from our human concepts. We also learned this in many other spiritual discoveries we've been doing on this channel, and even in our own time, that these human concepts of this is good and that is bad, and this should be that way and that should be a different way, are silly illusions of our own individual perspective in the grand scheme of things. If we could zoom out of our own individual experience and not have any bias or attachment to it, so it's like we've never been who we are at all. So there's no mask, there's no persona. I am me. Everything else is this, and this is how I feel about everything based on my experience of my life so far. No, cancel out all of that. Zoom out. You are just like a spiritual being witnessing the functioning of reality outside of time. So you could even zoom through 1,000 years real quick if you'd like, and then go back without any judgment. Then you could see how we could get to this place to where it all just is. And our judgment of it is really irrelevant to the functioning of the law of the nature of reality. Now, with that being said, everything happens according to law, the principle of cause and effect. Nothing ever merely happens, and there is no such thing as chance. That while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree. And by mentally, remember, all is mental. Let's go back to that. The principle of mentalism was number one. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all of the outward manifestations, the things that we see, and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent and known to our material senses, is unknowable, undefinable, and may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite mind. It also explains that the world that we are experiencing, the phenomenal world or universe, is simply a mental creation of the all. Atum, God. So the universe is mental. All is mind. So knowing that, if we are little versions of this with little versions of that here in an experience, and we can know this knowledge, this is why we learned in Hermetica, there was a whole discussion from Hermes to Asclepius, I think, talking about how man is a marvel, how we have this unique position, unlike the rest of the animal and plant kingdom and the gods even. We are like mortal gods, it said, and the gods are like immortal men. But men are unique, that we have, men and women, of course, humanity, we have this ability to comprehend God and the mind of God within our own small version of that. And this is what makes us so unique, that we can commune and we can travel with our thoughts to the heavens and back while not even moving an inch in our physical state. This is talking about astral traveling, astral projection, all that kind of stuff, which I am not interested in dabbling into. So if that's your area, it's probably a different channel that talks about that a lot. I'm just into the philosophy of all of this and kind of trying to wrap some kind of understanding to it. And so with that being said, I don't know why I went on that ramble tangent, but having fun anyways, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. We are almost there. So, playing this game of life on the chessboard of life, ladies and gentlemen, and dealing with cause and effect. Well, There is a way the Hermeticists understand that the art and the methods of rising above cause and effect, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. So you begin to be the cause of your reality rather than just being a victim of whatever's going on in reality. And a lot of us seem to like to play the victimhood state. I think it makes us feel a little safer and better, which is weird because it's the opposite of that. Different tangent again. So, anyways, you can rise mentally to a place through a work of self mastery to some degree to become a causer instead of a victim or an effect. The masses of people are carried along obedient to the environment and the wills and the desires. See, this is Hermetic occult mysticism, as it says on the back here. What is it? Occult and metaphysics is the category that this book would go into. But what it's talking about here is simple psychology and self-help work. I'm like, so why has this been squashed and swept under the rug by every intolerant, religious, dogmatic empire that there has been for the last how many ever centuries and ages? Because this is why. Because this would create a society of enlightened men and women, and humanity would rise to a level of consciousness that would defeat and overthrow all of the darkness that seeks to dominate, control, and destroy us. And there is that out there, and I just, for some reason, got passionate about that. Because they've been doing this to us for a long time. Too long, ladies and gentlemen. Too damn long. And it is about time that the masses of people that have been carried along by the puppet strings of the controllers, it's time that we start to cut those strings and take back our power. I'm serious about this, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I love this kind of philosophy, because this is what we need as an entire species, as an entire race, as an entire, I don't know. Like, we need this, ladies and gentlemen. All of us, every corner of the globe, to become causers instead of effects. Sorry. The masses of people are carried along obedient to the environment and the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves. Heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. So are we going to be a pawn, ladies and gentlemen, or are we going to become masters? Masters rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them. Now, don't beat yourself up. I was getting kind of intense there. That's probably the most intense I've ever been on this channel, but lighten up, Chase. Come on. Like, don't beat yourself up, ladies and gentlemen. This is all work. This is all something that we have to diligently practice, and it's not easy. And over time, we can create abilities within ourselves, within our minds and our hearts and our souls, to be causers, to be creators of our own experience, and to have the willpower to change our thoughts and change our lives. And when we begin to change the way that we look at things, the things that we look at and experience will begin to change for us. And so there's no pressure, there's no race. You're not gonna lose. It's just like they've been doing this to us for a long time and keeping this knowledge in the dark and calling it occult and mystical and metaphysics and esoteric for those who don't, why don't they just call this like what everybody needs and put it on that category of the library? Have it right in the front of Barnes and Noble, say everybody needs to read this today if you want to live a better life. For some reason, though, nobody cares, really, I guess. I don't know. That's why I'm here sharing this with you. So maybe somebody who doesn't care yet or hasn't come across it will see my energy about this and feel some sort of a resonation that will get them interested and excited into helping us to learn, ladies and gentlemen, how to play the game of life and no longer, as the book said, be moved about by outward causes like simply pawns on a chessboard. Rising to the plane above and begin to dominate and control our moods, our characteristics, our qualities, and our powers, as well as the environment surrounding us, and become movers instead of pawns. We can do this. Like I said, don't pressure yourself. That sounds like a lot. This, I like to think of Star Wars, where they get the Jedis. They find these unique people that have this, unique makeup of their body, and they have this ability to, connect to God or the Force, quote unquote. And so they take these kids at a very young age, if the family's willing. If not, then that's okay. But every family knows about how great these monks or these Hermetic masters are in their temples, and the knowledge that they carry, and the roles that they play in influencing and keeping, a quality of life in reality for people. And so often it's like, yes, please, it's an honor. But the point being, at a very young age, you go to the temple and you study this stuff with the masters, like Yoda. Imagine Yoda as a Hermetic master. I often think Jesus was a Jedi, if he existed. This is for some levity, ladies and gentlemen. But I mean, seriously though, they had to go to the temple when they were like 6 or 5, 7, however old, and then they studied constantly with the masters, and they meditated constantly on principles, on the Force, and attempted constantly to commune and connect and create a better connection. And they work on themselves, their physical, mental, spiritual self mastery, mastermind, body, and spirit show. Shout out to Matt Belair. I haven't thought of him in a long time. I really hope he's doing well. If anybody knows about Matt Belair, send him some love and let me know if you know anything in the comments below. It's been a long time since I've looked him up. But that's what I was saying. Don't pressure yourself, because a lot of people, if you're going to like get to this level of mastery, which we could do at a small amount if we practice diligently, make it a lifestyle. But to get to this level of mastery, you have to start at a very young age, spend your entire life in the temples, meditating and practicing and studying this along with other masters. So that one day, using the Star Wars thing again, you become a Padawan and then a knight and then a master. Anyways, to help us to become movers instead of pawns, they help to play the game of life, instead of being played and moved around by others' wills and the environment. The Hermetic masters use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. Woo! Woo! Holy cow. Wow, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's finish up the seventh principle of the seven Hermetic principles, the principle of gender. That was awesome. Hopefully, you're getting as much value from this as I am. Thank you for being here. Principle number 7 of the 7 Hermetic principles, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. So, as masculine as you think you are, you've got some feminine in you, Mr. Strong Man. Gender manifests on all planes. So, not just the physical plane. Keep that in mind. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental plane and the spiritual plane. So there's your three planes. We have the physical on the bottom, then the mental above it, and then the spiritual as the highest. I'm guessing. That just seems how it would be from vibration. The principle of vibration described the grossest form of matter being the densest here in the material, and the highest or the lightest being the spiritual. That was having to do with vibrations and frequencies and whatnot. This is true not only on the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex, man or woman. On higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws, however, will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men, I will add, for many a century. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. We learned a lot about those terms in the Corpus Hermeticum. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles. And this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has a female element also. This is spoken about in the electric and magnetic nature of the Magician card. Let's see if I can get to it without knocking all of my books off. But this here, as you can see, the man and woman down there in the bottom, they have a red and a blue area. The man has red on the bottom, the woman has red on the top, and this is positive and negative polarities of electric and magnetic fluids. But that's a whole different study. So I don't know if we'll ever go into that. That one's a little too much, I think. A little too much. But if you'd like to look into that, there was your little cameo of a deeper study into what we're discussing currently. However, the principle is ever the same. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed us for a long time. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, positive and negative, electric and magnetic, or this great principle within him or her. So, if you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. So probably this has a lot to do with manifestation or mental creation and generation, spiritual as well. We, in giant bold letters, I'm adding the giant bold letter part, but important. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. But once again, in giant bold letters, we caution you, do not play around with this lightly. It contains solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles, and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of fallacism tend to ruin the mind, the body, and the soul. And the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and the perversion of nature's principles. In the Corpus Hermeticum, there was a chapter that was about the is like the seven deadly sins, but it was the nine vices of men. I think it was that man's greatest evil is not knowing God. I forget. Regeneration in his Sermon on the Mount. But, anyways, one of those nine, which we went through in the previous series of that, so if you missed that, check that out. But one of those nine was concupiscence. I had to think for a sec there. I didn't want to waste your time. It was concupiscence, and I was like, what is concupiscence? Because I know all these other ones. It was like, similar to gluttony and greed and all of this kind of stuff. But concupiscence was actually the desire of lust and the perversion of what's being described here, ladies and gentlemen. So there's always a caution from the Hermeticists against such practices and teachings that would tell you that that's actually good, because there are some dark teachings out there that can use the energies from sexual acts as some form of mental alchemy or spiritual alchemy, magic, you might want to call it that. And that we do not recommend and we do not support. We're not saying that there isn't knowledge and wisdom about that may help people change their lives in a positive way. That could be the case. But as we're saying here, we caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle, the seventh Hermetic principle of gender. So with that being said, if you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them, ladies and gentlemen. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. However, for those of us who are interested in a pure philosophy and a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God, in a time where Hermes knew that those who would return to study a pure philosophy with a single-mindedness and a purity of heart. I mean, not saying that we all can't have sexy thoughts every now and then, ladies and gentlemen. That's not the point. The point is, don't take this principle the wrong way and don't get caught up into teachings that will use sex magic and stuff like that. That is a perversion of the natural principle. So, to the pure, all things are pure. And to the base, all things are base. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, that was amazing. I hope you think so as well, because I enjoyed the heck out of it. I'm so glad I'm rereading through this again because it's profound. I just loved that bit there about the masters, though, controlling their moods and their minds in order to become masters of the game of life. I'll reread that and then we'll leave it there for today. The masses of people are carried along obedient to the environment and the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves. Suggestion and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on a chessboard of life. But the masters, ladies and gentlemen, rising to the plane above, dominating their moods, their mental states, their characters, their qualities and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. They use this principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule in their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth and probably a lifetime of Hermetic study, wisdom, and knowledge. Let him read who can, ladies and gentlemen. Let him read who can. Let him or her read who can, man or woman. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a boom to the 7 Hermetic principles, this being part 2. Next week, we'll find ourselves on chapter number 3, entitled Mental Transmutation. That's a lot of what we talked about today. That was a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, so that through that awareness we can increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. And remember to seek to discover the lost wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history, as well as remember that there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. It is the ability that we create within ourselves that we can bring to life. And when we can bring happiness to life, then all the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be this, when I get that much, and when I have this, I'll finally be, becomes irrelevant. Because then we have that ability to be there. Now, then we are there. And then all of those things become irrelevant. And hopefully the entire journey is wonderful. Woo! That was a lot, ladies and gentlemen. That was powerful, profound, and I really hope you got value out of this one today. Until next time, be sure to expand the description to get this book for yourself, as well as Corpus Hermeticum and the Hermetica. I'll remind you, I've done a playlist on this channel already that we've gone through the whole Hermetica, the whole Corpus Hermeticum, with my ramblings and theories on what this might mean, learning together here with you. So if you'd like to follow along in this series, or just have the physical copy for future reference or reading when the power goes down, different subject, but get this book. There's a link in the description below, Amazon affiliate link, so I might make a few cents. That'll help support me and steal a few cents from Amazon. So you can get this book for yourself, ladies and gentlemen, and put it on your shelf so you can follow along in the future, as well as a link to my Etsy shop and my landscape paintings. And give yourself the gift of health. C60 Power. Oh, that's a thank you for your purchase. But it does say the ultimate antioxidant known to man, Nobel Prize winning, discovered by Buckminster Fuller. If you don't know anything about C60 or Buckminster Fuller, definitely check that out. It's a game changer, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I love and appreciate each and every one of you so much, especially those of you that spend time with me on each of these premieres in the live chat and that leave your comments on the videos later. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And until next time, be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set.